today we'll be talking about the properties of matter, which are either physical or chemical properties of matter. Okay? All right. So, there are general properties which are common or possessed by all matter. Kasi properties describe an object, di ba? Like for example, color, size, odor, texture, hardness, softness, etc. So these are characteristics or shall we say descriptions, okay, that will give you that will identify kung ano yung matter. But then, there are all matter, sabi natin, all matter has the general properties of mass, weight, volume, and density. Simply because we have been defining matter as anything that has mass and occupies space. So, there will be no matter if it does not have mass, which occupies space. The presence of mass is the reason why it occupies space. Kasi there is matter. Okay? There is substance in the matter. Okay? And yun nga, all matter possess these general properties. Kasi some properties, some descriptions are distinct for certain objects or for certain matter. Na siya lang yung merong ganong properties, siya lang yung merong ganong characteristics. But all of this, yung mass, weight, volume, and density is common or possessed by every matter. Okay? Before we proceed, tingnan muna natin kung ano ba yung mga yan. What is mass? Or how does mass relate or how is it related to inertia? So, una-una, ano ba yung mass? So, mass is the amount of matter in an object. Okay? Sabi natin last time during our last discussion that matter is consists of small particles. The presence of those particles, okay, is the one responsible for the mass of an object. Kung wala yung particles na yon, walang mass. And we saw that the smallest particle of matter is the atom. And the atom, sabi natin, if it comes from the same element, from the same substance, they are identical. Okay, but if they come from different substances, they differ from one another. And those differences lie in the fact that each atom, various atoms or atoms, so different atoms na lang, sabi natin, have different composition. Okay? And ano ba yung mga composition ng mga atoms na yon? O, di ba? There are subatomic particles we call protons, neutrons, and electrons. And last time, I have shown you the actual masses of these subatomic particles. Actual, in fact, which were measured in grams, even though we don't see them. Okay? And then, I have shown you the actual charges. Diba? So, the proton is the origin of positive charges that we know in nature. The electron is the origin of the negative charge that we know in nature. Yan. So, ito yon. Okay? And then, mass is constant. Okay? For a specific piece of matter or for a specific piece of an object, its mass is constant. Unless you add or remove matter from it. Okay? Unless you add matter to it or you remove matter from it. Otherwise, okay, it is constant. Kasi there's a specific number of particles in that specific matter that you are considering. Okay? Now, inertia is a property that is a result of mass. Okay, it describes an object's resistance to change its state of rest or uniform motion. Okay, remember there will be no inertia without mass. Okay, because mass is the reason why an object resists moving if it is at rest, or it is mass that is responsible for yung speed niya o velocity niya, whatever. Kung if you apply a force, gaano ba siya kabilis, mag-change ng velocity, Okay? It's because of the amount of matter present in that object, di ba? If you apply the same force for two different objects, pero magkaiba ang mass, or which one do you expect would have a greater velocity or speed? Of course, that one with lesser mass. O because that one with more mass will have more resistance. Di ba? Yun yun. Alright? So, mass and inertia basically are quite similar in the sense that mass is the quantitative measure of inertia. That is why we always say that inertia is the mass of an object at rest. Okay? Yan. All right. Now, what else? Weight and gravity. Weight. Yan. Unlike mass, weight is a changeable property of matter. Why is it changeable? Because it is influenced by gravity. Ano ba yung gravity? It is the Earth's force of attraction for all objects. It is the force of attraction. Diba? So in addition to giving an object inertia, mass is also the reason an object has weight. O kasi kung walang mass, diba, walang i-attract yung force of gravity. Diba? Or there's nothing to be pulled by gravity. Right? So there has to be mass in order to have weight. Because it is mass where gravity will have a pull of attraction. Diba? Or there's a force of attraction. So kung wala, so given na may gravity. Pero kung walang object na may mass, then walang weight na pag-uusapan. So therefore, weight is another general property of matter or another property that is possessed by every matter. And because it is dependent on gravity, okay, right? We can say that the greater the mass of an object, the greater is its gravitational attraction or pull. That is why if you have a person, kunyari yung kapatid mo, o yung nanay mo, o yung kaibigan mo is bigger than you are, then obviously, he will have a greater weight than you have. O kasi he has more mass. And therefore, gravity will have a greater force of attraction on him. Diba? So the greater the mass, the greater the weight. Kaya nga, the force of attraction or the pull of gravity on an object will be the one that determines the weight of an object. So if you compare mass and weight, okay, mass is constant. Okay? So whether you're in the moon or on Earth or on top of a mountain or at sea level, your mass remains the same. What varies if you are in different places, if you're in the moon or you're on Earth, on top of a mountain or at sea level, what varies is your weight. Okay? So that is why you are lighter, or shall we say you have lesser weight if you are in the moon, because the moon has a lesser force of attraction on every object. Di ba? Kaya nga pag nakakita kayo ng mga movies, di ba, parang slow motion yung mga tao doon. O kasi maliit lang yung kanilang force of attraction. Okay? Yan, because of lesser gravity. All right, now let's continue. If you have a box, okay, and then wrap it with paper, then remove the box inside, how will you describe what's left inside the paper? How will you describe it? You would think of space. Yes, what's left inside is just a space. Now that space that was occupied by the box is the volume of the box. O, diba? Kaya nga we say that all matter occupies space. And that space is quantified in terms of volume. Diba? So matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So volume is an important property of matter that takes up space. Okay? So now we can say that volume is the amount of space an object or matter occupies. So if we say matter is anything that has mass and occupies space, then we can also say that matter is anything that has mass and has volume. Okay? Simply because volume is the amount of space occupied by every matter. So even yung air that we do not see, it occupies, alam natin, it is a fact that gases will occupy any space available to them. So that is why they can occupy even the atmosphere, the whole of the atmosphere. But why is it that they cannot go uh, as far as the outer space? Diba? Kasi space din yun. Sabi natin, all gases occupy any space available. So the outer space is available. But why is it that gases cannot go as far as the outer space? Again, if you go back, it is because of gravity. Okay? Yung gravity. It is gravity that allows them to just occupy as far as the atmosphere, as far as gravity can allow them to go. Okay? But they cannot occupy the whole of the universe. Kasi may gravity. Alright? So, even that, kaya masasabi natin, we can even measure the volume of gases. Alright? Now, yan. If mass is responsible for inertia and weight, okay, yan, that's as far as, so there would be no inertia or there would be no weight without mass. Diba? There could be, even if there's gravity, if there's no mass, then there will be no weight. Something like that. So now let's go. Sabi natin, matter has mass and volume. So mass and volume together also has a relationship that can give rise to another property. Okay, so mass and volume as properties of all matter have a relationship that describes another one. And we call that density. Kasi for any object, the ratio of its mass to its occupied space is constant, di ba? So this property is called density. Yan. That's why we define density as the mass per unit volume of an object. And it gives you this relationship. Density is equal to the mass over volume. So, all right. So mass is a property in itself. Volume is a property in itself. If you take their ratio, it gives another property, which is density. Okay? Oh, simply because any matter has mass and it occupies space. So consequently, any matter has density. Okay? Yeah. And using this relationship, which you can call a formula in itself, okay? You can have estimations for volume and mass if you know the density. Okay, for example, you know the density and mass of a particular object, then you can estimate the volume. Or if you know the density and volume, then you can estimate mass. Okay, so let's take a look at some example of mathematical manipulation. So, calculating density. So, let's have this problem. If 96.5 grams of gold has a volume of 5 ml, what is the density of gold? Diba? Now, we know that density equals mass over volume. Substituting those values, we have this. And carrying out the operation, we have 19.3 grams per ml. And that is the density of gold. Now, if you double the mass of gold and make it, pag dinoble yan, magiging 193 grams, di ba? Tama ba? O pag dinoble mo yung mass, consequently, madodoble din yung volume niya. So if you try to calculate the density, you get the same value, which is 19.3 grams per ml. Okay? But then again, class, yung unit ng density is not limited or confined to grams per ml. It could be expressed in grams per liter or kilograms per liter or kilograms per ml. O kasi pag nag-convert naman yan and you are going to use this unit, you come up with the same value. Okay? All right, so let's continue. Now, last time, during our last virtual class, I've shown you that there are two forms of matter. So, reviewin lang natin yan. Okay? So, matter is either a substance or a mixture, sabi natin, di ba? And substances, how do we know that they are substances and how we know that an object or matter is a mixture? Now, substances have definite and constant composition that will give you distinct properties. O yun na, when speaking of distinct properties, substances are the matter or the objects that have distinct and sub properties. Now, substances are either elements or compounds. So if you have a compounds, they are made up of elements combined in definite and constant composition. And the elements making up the compound lose their identity. Nawala na yung distinct properties ng elements kasi nag-produce ng bagong distinct properties. And this is because of the chemical change that took place during, okay, the combination. And the combination is called the chemical reaction. Okay? So there's a chemical change if there's a chemical reaction. And there are observed chemical properties if there are chemical changes. Otherwise, you will not observe any properties. Okay? And mixtures, on the other hand, they do not have constant composition kasi variable. At dahil variable, walang distinct properties. Why is that so? The individual substances making up the mixture, okay, retain their own individual properties. All right? Right. So, speaking of distinct properties, okay, what are these distinct properties? So, they are either physical properties, may mga distinct physical properties ang matter, okay? What are these? These are properties that can be measured and observed without changing the composition of the substance. So, it can involve only alteration of form, diba? Or sometimes, yung mga change in state, probably. Okay? But then the physical properties that are distinct to that particular substances remain the same, remain constant. They remain unchanged. Okay? Yan. Kasi there was no change in their composition. So, na-observe lang yon doon sa kanilang properties. Like for example, melting point, di ba? Okay? With different substances have different melting points. So only water has a melting point of 0 degrees Celsius. Okay? Now other substances have melting points below or above this temperature. Diba? And boiling point as well. Diba? Density. That is why these properties, you can make use of them to determine their, to identify, di ba? For example, you have a liquid, okay? Of course, there are liquids na merong distinct odors, di ba? Like for example, alcohol, di ba? Pero, for example, yung appearance ng tubig at saka yung appearance ng alcohol, pareho, di ba? Okay, so, alsin muna natin yung odor. Now, how do we know that one is an alcohol or the other is water? How do we know which one is water, which one is alcohol? By getting their boiling point, diba? Or i-freeze mo pareho and then measure their melting points. You will see that if the one that has a boiling point, that reach a boiling point of 100 is water. Ayan. So, you can use these properties to identify kasi distinct to the substance yung mga properties na yan. Okay? And it did not result to a change in composition. Yun yung ibig sabihin natin ng physical properties. Okay? What about chemical properties? Right. So, you can only observe chemical properties if a chemical change occur. Unlike physical properties, okay, na na-observe mo at na-measure mo, now, chemical properties, okay, there has to be a chemical change before you can observe the chemical property. Why? Because it involved the change in the composition. Yan yung kauna-unahan talaga na tawag dito, shall we say, criteria that will tell us that chemical properties or chemical change have occurred or could be observed pag na-alter yung composition, di ba? But then again, like I keep saying, we do not see yung chemical composition. Hindi natin nakikita. So, how do we know that a chemical change has occurred? By observing their distinct properties. Like for example, di ba? Yung ripening of mango, souring of milk, or let's say decaying of dead bodies. O, di ba? How do we know? O, kasi, so let's take a look at ripening of mango. Mamaya, at the end, I will give you more illustration. Okay, so ripening. Pag hilaw siya, maasim, di ba? Now, the sour property or characteristic, okay, that's yung sour, yung description na sour is distinct for acids. Okay, so that means a ripe mango, ang composition na ay acids pa lang kasi maasim. Pag nahinog na, alright, nagiging matamis. And sweet as it is characteristic of sugars. Distinct for sugars. Alright? So, ibig sabihin, yung acid sa hilaw na mangga na-convert into sugar nung nahinog. Okay? Of course, it underwent a process. Okay, hindi natin pag-uusapan yun. Ang pinag-uusapan kasi natin dito is the alteration of chemical composition. Now, acids have a different composition compared to sugars. Okay? So that is why we say that a chemical change has occurred. So, na-observe natin na from acid, naging sugar. Okay? Yan. That's what we mean by forming new substance. So, unang-una, hindi na natin pwedeng gawing hilaw uli yung nahinog na mangga, di ba? So, therefore, a chemical reaction has occurred. Alright? So, that's what we mean by chemical properties. Alright? So, continuing, now, yung distinct physical properties, because we can observe and measure them, there are two categories of measurable properties. Ano-ano yon? We have extensive properties. Extensive siya if it depends on how much matter is being considered. Ibig sabihin, more matter, more of the property. Like for example, if you mass, di ba? More mass, okay, more of the property, di ba? For example, this object, the mass is, for example, a piece of metal, di ba? Or a block or a block of or a gold bar. Okay? Na ang volume ay, let's say, ano ba? 10 cubic centimeter. Di ba? Then with that volume, okay, we'll have a specific mass. Okay? O, pag dinoble mo yung volume, dinoble mo din yung, pwedeng madoble yung mass o madagdagan yung mass. Or if you increase the mass, mag-i-increase din yung volume o mag-i-increase din yung length. So that's what we mean by more matter, more property. Kaya extensive na extend. Alright? I hope that's clear. Now, the other one is intensive. Okay? Ito naman, yung hindi depende sa how much matter is being considered. So, ibig sabihin, marami o maunti, you still get the same property. You get the same measurement of the property. So, examples of this are temperature, boiling point, density, melting point, etc. Diba? Tumaba ka man o pumayat, you still have the same normal body temperature. Magpakulo ka ng 1 gram na tubig o 1 kaldero lang na tubig, you will get the same boiling point. Okay? So, these are intensive properties. Okay? So, summarizing the properties of matter, let me show you this diagram here. So, this is an overview of the properties of matter. Okay? So, if the properties are determined without changing the identity of the substance, ibig sabihin, hindi nag-change yung identity. Diba? Then, physical properties. Sige, sundan na lang natin itong diagram na to. If the answer to the question, are these properties determined without changing the property of the substance? If the answer is no, ibig sabihin, nag-change yung identity. At pag nag-change yung identity, then, you're talking about chemical properties. O, di ba? So, kanina, I have given you the example ng ripening of mango. So, here, let's have another illustration. How does a substance react in the presence of air? Okay? Ayan. I'll give you another example. Yung ating bubong is iron. Okay? And if it is exposed to air in the presence of water, kinakalawang. Okay? Yan. Yung iron na buong buo, kinalawang, rust is the new substance. Kasi iron as iron, when exposed to air, alright, in the presence of water, na-oxidize, na-convert into iron oxide. So from iron, and then oxygen, naging iron oxide. Nakita nyo ba yung class? O, ayan. So, yung chemical change, hindi lang sa laboratory na o-observe, even in our environment, in our everyday activities, di ba? O, sa inyo na lang, pag kumain kayo, di ba, kumain kayo ng tinapay, hindi yan lalabas na tinapay. Iba na ang lumalabas. Okay? Alright. So, are these properties determined without changing the identity of the substance? If the answer is yes, ibig sabihin, hindi nag-change. Alright? Then you're referring to just physical properties. Okay? And if that property depends on how much matter is present, then we're talking about extensive properties. And if it does not depend on the amount of matter present, then we have intensive properties. Okay? So that's all about the properties of matter.